All right, welcome after lunch. Do you all have a cup of coffee or tea with you? Because if people start snoring, I'll make fun of you a lot. And don't think that never happens, because it does. People snoring loudly in the back. Okay, I will make fun of you. All right, I'll be talking this afternoon about OpenStreetMap for the web. Whether that should be an uppercase F or lowercase f, I debated about 5 minutes and went to the pub. The slides will be online through this URL over here. That's also where you can leave feedback. The link to the slides isn't actually a link to the slides. It's a link to a page that has all the resource URLs on there. So don't bother trying to write them down. Just go to the link and have them all there, so you don't have to copy them. All right, so what am I talking about here? First, a little bit about myself. I'm Derick. I've been speaking at conferences for 12 years or something like that. I'm Dutch, but I live here in London. I work as one of the PHP MongoDB driver maintainers. I also hack on lots of older PHP extensions. You might have heard of this thing called Xdebug. It's also something that I've done. All right, and I absolutely love maps. Maps is a bit of a hobby for me. An OpenStreetMap combines two very interesting things. It combines walking around cities or countryside, maps, as well as pubs. And that's always a great thing, a good combination if you ask me. So let's talk a little bit about what maps actually are. Well, you know that the Earth is, the V is falling away, but the Earth is actually not really a square.
You could just adjust your resolution on your Mac, sorry.
On my Mac.
Or your PC.
No, I can't actually, but that's all right. Don't worry too much about this. If it's only the theme missing, don't worry about it. Right. So the Earth is not really a sphere, right? It is a bit elongated. It is a bit wider than it is high, and there's a bit of a pear shape, and yeah, not quite like that. There's no stem for it. But this creates quite a lot of interesting difficulties, because in order to approximate the shape of the Earth, you do it differently depending on where on Earth you are. So most mapping solutions, they will try to create a reference ellipsoid. And an ellipsoid is basically, well, a sphere, but then a bit longer and wider. And they try to match that to the size of the Earth, or to how do you call it? How the Earth looks like. And there's different ways of doing that in use. And this is a slide that I don't have outside of the UK, because it's not really necessary. But if you do anything with maps in the UK, every coordinates that will be provided for you will be done in a system called OSGB36. And that coordinate system is not the same as what you find on most online mapping applications. So what Google Maps uses, what OpenStreetMap uses, we use WGS84, which is the same thing that GPS uses. Fairly useful, whereas in the UK they tend to use OSGB36 because that is a better fitting shape to how the Earth looks like for the UK. Right, so that is sort of important, but after you have figured out which shape fits best, you still need to define two things. You need to, well, north and south is quite simple because that's your poles, but where do you put your meridian, right? And that is also not really that simple. I mean, how many of you have been here to the Royal Observatory in Greenwich? And how many of you have used a GPS on that line? Right. I know what happens then, because it doesn't show 0. You actually need to walk about 170 meters this way and end up on the blue line, which is the GPS meridian. And it has changed a little bit. So this is something that you need to keep in mind if you see coordinates in the UK, because almost everything will be using OSGB 36 coordinates. Luckily, you can convert it, but I don't have the maths for that one. Now, after you have created your coordinate system, you still need to map a spherical or an ellipsoid to a plane, right? Because usually I don't have a globe in my pocket, but a map is a lot easier to do. And there's different ways how you can do that. So here we have, actually this is the equivalent projection. Fairly useful for North America, but if you're in India, pretty useless, because as you can see here, it's all the way squished to the end, right? There's the Australian variant that likes to put Australia in the top middle. Again, probably not a worldview that you often see, but I mean, if you're in Australia, it might make some sense. I don't know. I think this looks really, really weird myself. Other things that exaggerate certain shapes, right? So this is is a Peter's world map. It's a horrible projection. It's a projection because the length of Africa and the length of, say what, Australia is not nearly as high as this, well, a third of Africa, right? And it's really difficult to see anything useful with this. So there's many different projections. What most online things use, including OpenStreetMap, is the WGS84 system. Anyway, now a little bit about OpenStreetMap. I've talked about maps, but OpenStreetMap is actually not about maps. It is about geographical data stored in an enormous database. It's all under free license. You can download everything. I have some example of that later. And you can use it as much as you want, providing that you give an attribution that you're using OpenStreetMap. And there's a few other points that you can have a look at if you look at the license. But the basic idea is that you credit OpenStreetMap and don't intermix it with your own personal data or your company's data to create a new database. So it's a bit of a copyleftish license. But that shouldn't really be a problem. So OpenStreetMap is both this database, but there's a few other points as well. There's APIs to add and read the data. And it's also a social platform for improving the map. And that is how I walked into OpenStreetMap. I don't know, another PHP developer, Ken Guest, I'm not sure if any of you know him. He introduced me to OpenStreetMap because I don't actually remember why. Don't remember why, but it's been all his fault that I spend way too much time mapping now. All right, so of course, you want to show a map if you have the data for it, right? So this is an API called Leaflet. So if you speak about the Google Maps API, you think about an API for embedding a map in your website, right? The OpenStreetMap API is the API for adding and reading data. OpenStreetMap doesn't provide a embeddable mapping tool for your website, but there's very many different variants that allow you to do that. I tend to use something called Leaflet, and Leaflet is fairly simple to use. I mean, this is probably the most simple way of doing it. You get to zoom around here from a mouse pointer and zoom in and stuff like that. I mean, it's the simplest way you can do, and there's some controls as well. Now, setting this up is not more than, sorry, to click there. It's about this much. I mean, there's not even PHP involved there, right? It's just a bit of JavaScript and a map library that you need to include. All right, so that is showing the map. But there's, of course, different APIs that you can do. And then this is a fairly simple one. Interesting. They seem to be, I know that they recently pushed a new style sheet like last week or so. And now all the tube stops are showing up a lot better than they used to be before, which I definitely like. Anyway, so this map automatically centered on London. And London is basically Trafalgar Square. There's actually a little dot in Trafalgar Square, if you can find it. And finding the coordinates for that is fairly simple. There's a service called Nominatim. Nominatim is a bit of a sister project of OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap itself, like I said, is the data, but there's lots of side projects such as Leaflet and Nominatim here. And yeah, it's really, really simple to find coordinates for things like that. What this basically returns is a big JSON document, or actually, I told it to return JSON, so that's why we're returning JSON, otherwise it is XML. But it returns quite a lot of information here, a lot more than I put in, because I put in London, UK. The UK is sort of important, because otherwise it sometimes returns London, Ontario, which is not quite where we are at the moment. And yeah, you get quite a lot of stuff back. The place ID isn't interesting. You get to see the OSM type, which can either be a node, array, or a relation. Its ID, again, not very interesting. But what is interesting that you get a bounding box back for the object as well. And a bounding box is basically a demarcation of London in this case. As well as here we have the center points, and it also expands the name. So it expands London into, what was it again? It's gotten a bit ridiculous lately. It's London, Greater London, England, United Kingdom, European Union. There we go. But it provides you with lots of information there, right? It also shows an importance. I have no idea how that's calculated, and there's some icon. All right, so to do a little bit better with this, if the map loads, then I can give a demo. Oh, not having a good day here. Zoom in, zoom out. Okay, I might have done something wrong there. So let's search for the brewery, for example. And so what I've done here is basically I added in the name of it, and then it shows you the top 5 results. In this case, it expands the brewery, City of London, to the brewery in Montcalm, London City, Chisel Street, Golden Lane Estate, City of London, including the postcode. So that goes quite far, but I can click it. And then you'll see that it put the box right around the brewery. And this is not something that cost me a lot of time to make. If you want to have a look at this example, there is a URL here. It's on my GitHub repository. Again, don't bother writing this. It's in the resources link. And I have some other OpenStreetMap tools in there as well. Some that create some visualizations and things like that, so have a look at that. Of course, if you have more than one result, you get things like, let's try Paris. And you get a few, right? You get Paris, which is the whole city. Another time, sometimes things show up twice, I don't know why. 3 times. Then there's also Paris in the United States somewhere, and in Texas and things like that. So it's a little demo I threw together, and it's not very difficult to do. Now, interestingly, you can also do the opposite. So you can give it coordinates, and it will tell you exactly where you are. So let me give that a shot as well. We are here. Is it this building? Looks like it. Chisel Street. And if you zoom in far, the further you zoom in, the more it expands the address. So in this case, I gave it coordinates, and it came back with an address. And this service is a sort of a free service, but there are some resource limits. They're not hardly enforced unless you spam them, basically. But as with any of the tools around OpenStreetMap, you get to set it up yourself if you want to. Setting up Nominatim for a city like London doesn't require lots of resource. If you want to do it for the whole world, you need a very fast machine with lots of memory. All right, so this is the reverse geocoding. Now, what else can we do? Okay, for geocoding, of course, Google has a service as well, but it's not free. You can't actually use it if you're not using Google Maps to display it, so I can't really use it in this presentation. But another good service for doing any sort of geolocation and geo stuff is a service called GeoNames, and they will have also they offer all their data for download. So if you want to find an enormous list of every city in the world with population, location, and time zones, geonames.org has it for you. Very useful website. All right, next slide. It takes some time because it does magic. No, there we go. So this is another side project. This is actually developed outside of OpenStreetMap. It is a routing engine called OSRM, which I think stands for OpenStreetMap Routing Mapper. I don't know. I made that up. And basically, they have a very nice website that you can use to put in some data. I can probably demonstrate that. That's more fun, isn't it? Also more dangerous, but there we go. Would you like to share my location? Let's do that. See how that works this time. Definitely not in Tellington, but apparently the router that I'm connected to used to be in Tellington. Anyway, let's try Nottingham. This one, yeah, that will work. And we go to Moscow. I guess that is Moscow. Okay. Is that Moscow? Sort of. Maybe I should have picked some slightly smaller route, but I'm just wanting to show how fast it is doing well, if there's data available. And this is continent level routing in 10 milliseconds, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. Okay, Nottingham to, what's close to Nottingham? Derby, there you go. English geography isn't the greatest for me. Is it this one? Zoom to route, there we go. And then it gives you the route between Nottingham and Derby, including step-by-step instructions. Sometimes it has alternatives. You can also create a link and you have a, how do you call it, a permalink to the routes. I find it quite useful to play with. And the interesting thing is that this is an API as well. So if you don't want to use their fancy website, but use it from your own application, you can actually do that. Right, so let me go back to the slides. Next one. So let's have a look at how you would interact with OSRM. OSRM actually uses Nominatim internally for resolving names. So the first thing you basically do is what I've done here is the Londonian St. Paul's Cathedral. I basically queried Nominatim to figure out where those places are. Because the routing engine, basically what you give it is 2 coordinate points and it calculates the route between it. So yeah, there's a bit of formatting necessary, as you can see here. Not too interesting, but yeah, you can basically query this route with 2 coordinates and you'll get back another JSON document, which looks something like this. So it first has a diversion, that's not interesting, but it has a status message. Status message is useful because sometimes it can't find a route. In this case, the status is we found a route, which is always a good thing. And then it gives you this route geometry string. And that is an encoded array of points that can be used to draw the route on the map. Now, this is encoded in, how do you call it? It's Google GeoPoints something array thingy, of which I have an explanation and a decoder in the resources again. So have a look at that. And then, of course, you have a route summary. It tells you the total distance, the total time, which I think is in meters and seconds. Start point and end point. They're not always exactly the same as what you give in, because how the resolving isn't necessarily a one-to-one mapping. All right, just a bit of URLs about the Openstreetmap routing engine. It's on project.osram.org. It is really fast. If you want to do a whole world routing, you need a fast machine because there's just too much data in it. But it's really, really fast. And they're happy for you to use the service. Again, don't spam them. It's basically the rule. All right, let's look at a few other things. This is not so much PHP things. It is more like share your location. Right? It's basically an HTML API call that allows you to find out where you are at the moment. So you click share location and it will probably tell me I'm in Tennington again, but which is not the location where I am really. I don't know why that goes wrong. I can't explain that. This is actually goes through the browser to a Google geolocation service and apparently doesn't know the correct IP address for this location. So I don't quite know why that happens, but in most of the time it works fine. Doing that in HTML isn't very difficult. This is something, I'm using a different mapping API, which is called Openlayers. Openlayers is a lot more powerful because it can actually deal with all the different datums, all the different coordinate systems. But because it can deal with that, you need to do a lot of manual work. I tend to prefer Leaflet now because it's so much easier to use. But the most interesting thing here is basically the first line anyway, is there's a API in HTML5 that's called navigate to get geolocation, get current position, which will then, with two callbacks, either one works or it doesn't work, you then get the location back, and that gets put into position, which you then can extract the longitude and the latitude from. That's basically it, and there's some calculation to draw circles and things like that. Again, quite useful to use. All right, so let's have a little bit a look at OpenStreetMap data itself. The data that you can download from OpenStreetMap is all in XML format. The XML format is very simple because it needs to be quite fast. However, if you download a whole planet, it's about 18 gigabytes of compressed XML. That's probably a bit more than you can process in about an hour. It'll take a couple of days, really. The data in there consists of nodes, and nodes are basically points with coordinates. As you can see, I have a node of something. I don't actually know what it is. It's probably just a node. It has no other information attached to it. Nodes make up ways and areas. An area is basically a way where the first and the last point are the same. That creates like a loop, right? Ways are used for roads, footpaths, hiking trails, shipping lanes, rivers, streams, whatever you can think of. And then there's areas which are pedestrian areas or parks or buildings and things like that. And a way has a way ID and some random data, and then it has a reference to the nodes. So in order to process this XML file, first has all the nodes, and then it has all the ways in there. So in order to figure out actually where the ways are, you need to keep a cache of all the nodes. Again, if you have about 1 billion nodes, it's not going to fit in memory, so you need to come up with something cleverer than that. how you do that is not part of this talk. But the interesting thing is that you can describe every node and way with tags. And the tags are all down here. Tags are free-form, so you can basically tag any object exactly how you want to do that, which makes it possible to have quite a lot of extra data in OpenStreetMap that is not necessarily visible on the map. All right, so editing those things is also, again, more fun to show. Hang on. So I have downloaded the area here. I know it's a bit small, but this is an editor called JOSM. And JOSM is basically cat drawing programming for adding maps. I don't think I should be adding anything interesting. Okay, hang on. Of course, I made it large when my screen was a different size. But let's, for example, pick this thing on the corner here. The thing on the corner is a pub. Pubs are really well mapped in OpenStreetMap. Probably also sampled most of the time, but I won't know. So yeah, you have a couple of tags here. It's an amenity, it's a pub, it's a building. Many points of interest in London are mapped as buildings now instead of just the points. In other countries that differs a little bit. It depends a little bit on what the local mappers have decided on how they do this. In the UK, if we know the building, we use the building for it. If we don't, it's just a point. Both of them are good enough. At some point, somebody can upgrade it. You can also see that in the background, I actually have satellite imagery. That is satellite imagery from Bing. Microsoft is kind enough to allow us to use the satellite imagery as a background for positioning things. Well, there's a few caveats there, though. It's not always properly aligned, and you can, I guess, sort of see that, right? Like the building outlines aren't exactly on where the satellite imagery is. And that can be because of different reasons. Either the GPS traces work accurately, or the satellite imagery isn't accurately aligned, and there's various different ways on how you can fix that. If you really want to fix that, you need really expensive equipment, and OpenStreetMap being a volunteer project, we don't have that. But most of the time, it is done pretty good. Let me zoom in a little bit. Also, different zoom levels in the satellite imagery are differently aligned. Hopefully I can show that. Anyway. I don't know, somebody mapped here something interesting. I have no idea what it is. It's a wall. There you go. Hey, that's not as bad as what some people in Germany map. They map all the benches in parks, including when it has sunlight. There you go. But yes, all this information is in here. There's also streets. It tells you what the speed limit is. Referencing, in some cases, the surface as well. Again, I don't tend to map that for roads, because most of the time there are asphalt. So I would only add that in case it is not asphalt. So if it's a road in cities are mostly asphalt, right? So I would map the exceptions, which makes a whole lot more sense, I think. It's the same thing for footpaths or tracks in the countryside. You don't have to say it is mud or ground, or whatever you want to call it. It's mostly mud, to be fair. And all of the data is in here. I know there's a hairdresser here. It's a nightclub, including opening times. So yesterday evening, after the event here ended, we were looking for a pub that was open longer than 11. That's quite difficult in London. But with this information in OpenStreetMap, you can actually probably create a map of pubs that are open at this moment, right? If I have time, I might write a hack for that. And then we probably have to send all the mappers around to all the pubs again to figure out when they're open. And whether they actually sell beer. Anyway, lots of data in there, and you can edit it. I'm not going to edit and upload anything now, because then I'll spend the next hour adding things to the map. There's different editors. The one that shows here is JOSM, or Java OpenStreetMap editor. It is an editor primarily used, well, it's written by Germans. So it's a bit more complicated, but really, really powerful. That joke doesn't work in Germany, by the way. All right, so how do we get the data in there, right? We tend to do that with mapping parties. In London, we have a mapping party about every 2 weeks when it's daylight savings time, which basically means we meet up at about 6, map around for an hour, hour and a half, and then go to the pub. In winter, we just go to the pub straight away. But it's kind of fun. Also, we do sometimes weekends where we go to the countryside and then spend a day walking around and actually mapping footpaths. Mapping footpaths in the countryside is a lot more work than mapping in a city where you have good satellite imagery. I mean, it's very clearly to see where the buildings and the streets are. But footpaths in the countryside is really, really difficult to see with satellite imagery. So we prefer to survey this. Surveying is probably one of the most important things with OpenStreetMap. It's really, really important that you actually verify that what's on the map is actually on the ground. So we don't tend to, it's unlikely that street names in OpenStreetMap are different from what the signs say on the road. Whereas some of the ordnance survey data actually have incorrect names for the streets, which is a bit annoying, but so it goes. So surveying is really important, and we do that by hand with a GPS if necessary, but mostly with pen and paper and cameras, so that we don't have to write down all the details of all the buildings and restaurants we're passing. We always do the surveying in a group. It's a lot of fun. And this is just a quote from one of my friends, Rick Ogden. There's a bit of a running joke, is that I like mapping post boxes. They're quite useful as navigation marks. That's my reason, but I don't. So Rick was saying that he mapped another post box, and that would make me proud. This is after we've gone out mapping. As you can see, we're about a dozen people here. That's usually where that ends up at. All right, so editing the map, I've demoed, so I can skip the slides. There's also actually, I probably should show you that. Oh, no, that's not the one. This one. Why does it go to the German one? Because I'm too fast typing. So if you, where's this? Is it Tennington again? No. It's somewhere in Germany. Suburb city of London. Okay, whether that's correct, I don't quite know. But again, we are the Bank of England. That's basically the city of London, I suppose. You can actually edit straight from the website with a Flash-based editor, if you log in. I can't stand Flash. Also, I can only get to use one mouse button here and not the right click, because Flash doesn't do that. But it is a very simple way of getting started adding things to OpenStreetMap. You basically, the view that you have, and you can basically draw things, drag things to it. So I wouldn't call the Bank of England a museum, but you can see how easy it is. Then you can click it, you can give it names, you can give it other details. I tend to always add addresses and postcodes as well, because that is data that you can really only find by surveying, because you can't copy it from anything else because it's copyrighted information, right? Anyway, this is how you do some editing on the map. Leave the page, delete my changes by converting the Bank of England into a museum. All right. Okay, so surveys don't only happen in the UK. In the UK, most of the data has been contributed by people. In the Netherlands, lots of the data has been imported. In the US, the whole road network has been imported. And that is a bit of a sad thing, because it means there's no community there that actually does the surveying. Like in the UK, there's probably 500 people mapping every day. Yeah, little bits here and there. I mean, usually when I go somewhere and I see things that are not on the map, I'll add when I get back home. Whereas in the US, you don't have that at all. Because the data is already there. It's usually rubbish data as well, because it's been imported from some counties and they don't even know how to scale properly. So sometimes you see like a whole development that's twice the size of what it actually is, because they haven't bothered to scale properly, which is a problem. But of course, you get to fix that if you want to do that. But more of a social thing is OpenStreetMap is also really useful in humanitarian areas. A couple of us split off into something called HOT, which is Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And they try to empower local populations to create their own maps without giving the data to Google. Because Google noticed that this is a really good thing to do. Anyway, Kibera is a slum in Nairobi, and let me zoom in a little bit. So what I've mapped here is I've mapped all the tracks, the footpaths, buildings, water fountains, toilets, clinics. Those are the things that are important there. They don't care about benches that have sunlight and things like that, right? No, it's the basic things that are important for them. And the HOTS team actually went in there and trained the local population to do mapping. And I think that's really, really good. And there's a lot more of those projects going around. Right. They have changed the logo since last time I looked at this. Right, so that's a really good thing. Google thought, well, we can do this as well. We have a tool called MapMaker, and we do the same thing. So this is a difference limit called Gotcha. And you can see, well, it's difficult to see because the lines aren't very bright. There's lots and lots of footpaths here, and it has water vendor in big letters. And they put this in a blog post, make a big hoo-ha about it, but they sort of forgot to scroll to the left, where the OpenStreetMappers then added an Easter egg and show that our map is actually a lot better again, where it has buildings and clinics and water for sale. I don't know. So there's a few differences. Google MapMaker has been introduced in the US now, and I'm not sure whether it's available in the UK yet. So what they try to do is to get people to contribute data to them under their license, right? Which basically means you can't ever get the data out again. And one of the most powerful things about OpenStreetMap is that you can get the data out. So even though Google MapMaker, if you contribute there, the data will show up on your map tiles, it's still just images, right? There's no data behind it. And you're basically helping out Google, creating value for Google instead of creating value for yourself. So OpenStreetMap is on the other side, right? Makes happy people. You can get to the data. You can do basically everything with the data. So instead of contributing to Google MapMaker, why not do an open thing, right? So, but there's always a bit of a struggle to explain this to people. I hope you're quite understanding why it is better to contribute to OpenStreetMap, right? Right. So let me have another look at how you get to the data. You can query that URL. Actually, I was lying. It wasn't 18 gigabytes. It's 26 gigabytes now. There's lots and lots of data in it. I wouldn't, if you start with this, don't start with the whole planet. Again, I would probably even go as far as go even slightly smaller than a country, because I get to import England on my laptop with a nice fast SSD in there in about 5 hours. So yeah, think about that. So if you start doing this, either pick a smaller country or query for a smaller slice. And there is an API called Overpass. Again, as you can see, written by Germans. So it's really complicated to use, but really powerful. And basically what you can do is you can query it with a star. A star basically means every node where your relation. And then with a bounding box, you basically give it the coordinates of where you want to map from. And in this case, I've also added a predicate saying that I only want all the restaurants in this area. And you can add more and more predicates here. This is actually not the Overpass API. This is called XAPI API or XAPI. That used to be really slow and absolutely useless because it was just too slow. So the Germans that wrote this Overpass API, they made a compatibility layer to then use XAPI as well. All right, so you can do a little bit more with Overpass as well. So what I'm doing here is I create like a query object, XML query-based object, where what I query for is a union for all the nodes and ways where the amenity tag is a pub. So basically I'm looking for all the nodes and all the ways in this bounding box, hence the $PB. Then from this union, I query around with a radius from 2 meters. All the bus stops. So basically what this query says, find me all the pubs in, I think it is London, all the pubs in London that are not more than 2 meters away from a bus stop. Okay, it's a bit of a contrived example, but you can see how powerful this gets. And yeah, you can simply post to this URL and you get a result back. There's a few different providers that provide the Overpass API. Again, if you really need to use this a lot, you can set up your own instance of it, because again, this is open source. Alrighty. And then, of course, because you can get to the data, there's lots of visualizations that are possible to the right. So this is a map of all the cycling routes. And the cycling routes highlighted in blue and red. You can see that the icons with cycles on it are the cycle repairing shops. surprises me whether pubs are not showing up here, but I would have expected that to do. This is an image, so I can't actually look at. Also, this isn't Putney, this is Edinburgh, but I zoomed away. So this is OpenCycleMap. OpenCycleMap also has an application called CycleStreet. There's a website, CycleStreet, and an application called CycleStreets, which provides you cycling routing in the UK, specifically tailored for cycling routing. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with Edinburgh, but it's this big hill somewhere, right? And if you would do the fastest or the shortest route, it would have routed you straight through the hill, but it's fairly steep. So actually this engine knows about this and will route you around the steep bits, and basically in this case around the hill. So it's really, really tailored for this. It also knows about quieter streets and busy streets, and it will tailor your route according to that. Very cool to have a look at. Again, some Germans thought it would be nice to have an OpenStreetmap where they map all the buoys and light signs and lighthouses and things like that. Transport routes are mapped and shown with the transport layer, which is also available from openstreetmap.org. Again, this is actually this area. That's by accident, by the way. Skiing resorts, this one is Trysil in Norway, where they have mapped all the pistes and rendered in a specific way. This is data you don't see on every of the tiles, but there's different layers that show different information. All right, so skip over that. And this is something that I've come up with myself. I'm a bit addicted to Foursquare, but I don't like giving Foursquare data for the same reason I don't like giving Google Maps data. So what I've come up with is an idea is that I'm making an application that allows you to check into places. But you're not getting points for checking in, getting points for contributing data. So in this case, the English National Opera has enough data, so it's not very useful, but there's lots of restaurants around here that don't have a specific tags. They don't have the address, or they don't have the restaurant's cuisine type, whether it's Italian or Chinese, for example. Or lots of addresses are missing. So I'm trying to turn this into an application that makes it fun to add data to OpenStreetMap. But I'm rubbish making pretty things, so we'll see how this continues. All right, this is what I had to say. If you scan this QR code, which you probably can't do from the back, you end up at this URL, where the slides aren't there yet, but I'll sort it out after the talk. It also has a list with resources. You can always send me an email at Derick@Rethans. You can send me tweets. I try to be nice to people. Please leave feedback at Join In. I find it really important to know what you think of this talk. So please go there. So far, are there any questions? Yes, go for it. Wait for the mic.
I just wondered if you could get things like contact details out when you said that you could access data. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if you put a bounding box around London and you said, get me all the telephone numbers or something like that, or even if it went as far as email addresses for certain establishments like, say, restaurants or pubs.
All right, yes, that is actually possible to do. Whenever I go to a restaurant, I will always tend to add as much data as I can find about the place. So that is opening times, telephone numbers, websites, Wikipedia links sometimes. And yes, you can get the data out of it because all the data is available, right? You can do that through the XAPI API. If you query for a node or a way that is a restaurant, you get all of the tags with it. So yeah, that's absolutely possible. Yeah.
Hello. Where's the best place to do my conversions for longitude, latitude, eastings, northings, and GPS? And which way do you think we should be moving?
I didn't catch the last bit, sorry.
Which way do you think we should be making the standard? Eastings, northings, GPS,
all right.
Longitude, latitudes?
I think GPS and WGS84 is used in so many other places besides the UK. I think that'd be a really good standard. But I can understand that for things like countryside maps, you want the better shape of the Earth, and in those cases, the Ordnance Survey maps with northings and eastings is a better solution. I never found it a real problem that the path that I'm looking for is 7 meters off. I mean, you can see if the path isn't there and just a little bit along right. But to convert that, I actually started working with 2 other guys on an extension to do the conversion between those coordinate systems. I actually have some code up there that does it in PHP, but it's fairly slow. So I've been starting to work on extension, but I'm not quite on with that yet. Right, hopefully that answered the questions. All right. Okay, perfect. All right, there are some more right there. 2 there.
Hi. What's your experience with producing static maps?
With static maps, so anytime I've done that from Openstreetmap Data, I actually have a whole rendering stack set up. I import the data that I want to render, I tweak the style sheets, and I just create an image out of it. Mm-hmm. Now, OpenStreetMap.org itself also has a link to create a static map, as far as I know. That works fairly well.
There is a German site, again, I've found, that actually creates the static maps for you, but it is quite limited. You know, it gives you, like, say...
It's limited, and it was spamming our server, so we took it offline. So... Okay. There was a German website that did that. Yes.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yes. No, we are actually talking to the guys to provide a better way of doing this, because basically what they're doing is they're just requesting all the tiles they could find. And because those are high zoom level tiles, we can't pre-render the whole planet, because it's just too much data. So they get rendered on the fly for zoom level 18 and 19. Now, if you request 500 of them, that takes quite a long time. And that basically took down our rendering infrastructure. So we don't allow people to scrape map tiles. It's fine to use in your website or mobile apps, but it is not okay to download all the map tiles to have them offline in your device. There's much better ways for doing that, like downloading the data, converting it into vector data, which is what most of the map apps do. But for static maps, I have my own setup, which is not trivial, but not too difficult. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is because we used to use, like, say, the Google Static Maps API, and that's I think getting some sort of change anyway. And we're looking into going a bit freer, if you like. So you say it's quite easy to implement an open source way of generating, not open source, but, like, say, you know what I mean, not, like, say, commercial or restricted way of creating static maps?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the only thing, if you use any map data, you need to credit it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. One there?
Oh. Hi. Yeah, along the lines of projections, wouldn't it be easier perhaps to provide a way of rendering it onto a surface, like a sphere, to actually match the shape of the globe instead?
Not sure where I got the question, sorry.
So, is there a way that OpenStreetMap could provide instead of doing a flat projection, do it rendered onto an actual sphere, perhaps using like canvas or something?
Oh, like that. I have not seen people actually creating globes from OpenStreetMap data, but I can't see why that wouldn't work, right? I did see something where instead of putting it on paper, they put it on cloths, waterproof cloths that you can basically take out in the countryside. I mean, how often have you been in the countryside with a map that gets wet? It's kind of rubbish. So they actually have a waterproof, foldable map. But I've never seen anybody doing it on a globe specifically. But it would be cool to have. But I don't know about it, sorry. One there.
How complete is your UK coverage?
I would say UK coverage is excellent. It doesn't go as far as the 1 to 25,000 ordinary survey maps in the countryside. But I've yet to find a place where the paths that I was walking on weren't mapped. London, I would say, is a lot better, points of interest-wise, than Google Maps. A lot better. Also more up-to-date. So yes, coverage in the UK is excellent. Coverage in Germany is excellent. The Netherlands is very good. But there's other countries where, I mean, the community is fairly new and the maps aren't so good. But that is mostly points of interest related, not so much road network related. We don't have 100% coverage of all the roads in the UK, but it is way above 99%.
As a bit of an extension of that, how good is your postcode data?
So postcode data is always an interesting one because the data isn't free, right? I think Royal Mail is being pushed to open up the PAF data file, and they're sort of leaning towards that direction. They already have opened CodePoint Open, which we are still trying to figure out whether we can use that legally. But of course, you can overlay that on a map, right? As for postcode coverage for buildings, I wouldn't say it is usable enough to be able to rely on it. You'd be better relying on actually entering the addresses and the names of restaurants than asking for postcodes. But querying the postcode database, which you can download and do anything you want with, really. Mapping that to coordinates, of course, you can do. But not as part of OpenStreetMap at the moment. All right, there's one more question, and I think that sort of has to be the last one, right?
Yeah, sorry if it's a bit mean, Derick.
That's okay.
I'm struck by your example of showing pubs that happen to be open at a particular time of day.
Yes.
But it strikes me that if there's only 500 of you walking around the UK, then that information, like phone numbers or cuisines or whatever, is going to rapidly get out of date.
Yes. So the first challenge is getting all the data in there. The second challenge is keeping all the data up to date, right? And the only way how you can do that is by having mappers that take care of a specific part. I mean, the area where I live, every time I notice a shop is gone or has a new name or whatever burned out, then I tend to map that instantly, right? So it will be that my area is fairly up to date, but there's other parts of the UK where it is more of a problem. Yeah, that is a challenge, but the only way how we can fix this is having more people taking care of their own blocks or own local environment, and it doesn't cost you a lot of time. And I find this quite relaxing to do. So, anyway, one more question there. Well, hang on, Mike.
Is there any support for photos? For example, you could take photos of the pub you're going to visit or restaurant? Or the sort of attached binary data in general?
The only way how you can attach binary data is by linking it. We have links to Wikipedia, we have links to Flickr. Actually, Flickr has like a specific tag that allows you to tag things to OpenStreetMap as well, which you can query on. We don't store binary data in OpenStreetMap itself. But there's links to it, quite a lot. Mostly of people doing the surveys, then linking it to the original photos so that you have proof that it's all actually there. All right, thanks very much, guys. I hope it was useful. Slides will be online there later, and as well as a long list of resources for you to explore. Thank you very much.